Hey everyone, this is Visual Force. In this week's video, we'll be going over my process for creating toy photos. I've been a toy photographer since 2017, and aside from collecting and making videos like this, it's one of my favorite hobbies. This video will be more of an outline of the process rather than a tutorial, but if you want something more in depth in the future, let me know about it in the comments below. I'm breaking this video into a few different sections based on my overall process. There is no right or wrong way, this is just the outline I follow. The first step is going to be the concept, where I visualize the setup and photo. That's followed by the actual setup, then posing and adjustments, editing, and creating a caption, and finally posting. The figure we'll be using for this photo is the new Fang Fighter from Series 6 of Jazzware's Micro Galaxy Squadron line. I'm a massive fan of this line and really enjoy the intricate details we get on the figures as well as the vehicles. I've uploaded a short unboxing of this ship in addition to the Phantom on my Instagram. Just click the link in my description to check it out since we won't be unboxing this here. Alright, let's begin with the concept. I get most of my inspiration for these photos by scrolling through Instagram and seeing other people's work, or watching any Star Wars movies or TV shows. I also organize my office space pretty often and sometimes see a figure that I haven't shot in a while, or maybe one I've never photographed. Yeah, when you collect most Black Series figures, these do tend to pile up. Once I have a general concept in mind, the first thing I do is write it down in a notebook. From there, I think about the actual figures I'll need, whether it's going to be an indoor or outdoor photo, and sometimes I take the time to draw things out even though I'm not the best artist. After thinking through the concept, I do my best to actually start the next step right away. Sometimes these ideas pile up in that notebook, but I always do my best to minimize the time between these steps. Let's move on to the actual setup. When thinking through my photo, I always try to figure out if it's going to be an indoor or outdoor shot, and whether or not it's going to require a diorama or maybe just a computer screen. You can find all types of Star Wars dioramas on eBay, and there are also a ton of Instagram users who create and sell their own. The first step in using the digital diorama is finding a suitable background, and sometimes this takes longer than capturing the actual photo. I like to use Google right off the bat, and most of the time I end up on royalty-free stock image websites. From there, I download the image and pull it up in Photoshop. One thing I quickly wanted to mention is the type of lens that I use for my photography. If you're already active in the toy community, I'm sure you've seen either one of these before. On the right, we have the 100mm f2.8 macro lens, and on the left, we have the 50mm f1.8. Most of the time, I find myself using this 100mm because it adds great depth to that background, but when I have a wider angle shot in mind, I do use this 50mm. If you are just starting out, the 50mm is a very affordable lens, and I think it's a really great starting point. I didn't show my whole tripod setup and everything, but hopefully you can imagine it. Of course, it does take some time to get everything in frame and properly positioned. To get this ship in the pose I'm after, I'm using this little clip that I normally use when I'm customizing figures. Not only does it do a great job at holding those pieces in place, it actually works pretty well in holding up the Fang Fighter. Now we're on to the posing and adjustments. So now everything is set up and we'll start taking our test shots. This really helps me determine if everything is in the right position or if I need to tweak anything. And I'll let this time lapse play out because you can see how many times I needed to make adjustments, change the light, the position. What you can't see is how many times I actually changed the camera angle, but most of the adjustments were actually to the Fang Fighter and the digital background. Once we have our photo captured, we can move on to the second to last step, editing. Like moving from concept to execution, I also like to move on to editing as soon as possible. I've looked through all the photos and landed on this one, so let's start editing. One thing I wanted to note is my setup is still in place just in case I need to go back and make any adjustments or maybe even reshoot. There's nothing more frustrating than cleaning everything up and then having to reset up. Okay, let's get back to the editing. Again, this isn't a full photography tutorial, so I'll breeze through some of these steps pretty quick. Don't worry, I'll give you some tips along the way. One of the first things I adjust when I get into the raw settings is going to be that exposure, and I do tend to bring it up in most cases. I also adjust the vibrance and saturation right off the bat. The great thing about shooting in raw is you can go down to color mixer and completely adjust all of the color settings. If you want to decrease the saturation of that blue, you can do that. If you think the mountains in the background are too green, you can also decrease that saturation. I have taken a little bit of time off camera to get my settings just right, and it definitely takes a lot longer than what I just showed. Now we move on from camera raw to actual Photoshop. Most of our lighting and tweaks have been done in that raw step, so the only thing I'm doing here is removing that flight stand and adding some effects. I could go into great depth about adding these effects, but I'll keep it very simple. Using the paintbrush, I really wanted to add some jet streaks to give the Fang Fighter some movement in the photo, and I did that using the paintbrush, adjusting the opacity of that, and then greatly blurring those lines. If that's something that you want more information on, there are a ton of YouTube reviews on how to do this, or you're welcome to message me on Instagram and I can go over that with you. Alright, we've made it to the final step, the caption and posting. Okay, I won't bore you too much here. This is kind of just a generic caption. I like to give every post a title and then talk a little bit about the figures. Of course, in this case, it's a vehicle, but I did talk a little bit more about the Fang Fighter and the Phantom. At the point of recording this video, hashtags are kind of on their way out. Apparently, Instagram favors keywords over hashtags, but in my case, I haven't really seen that, so I continue to use hashtags to this day. That being said, I do try to add some keywords in the caption just in case. And I also like to include a behind the scenes photo if I can. Not always possible, but in this case I did. Granted, this video is kind of a giant behind the scenes. I know I went through a few of these steps quickly, but I didn't want this to feel like Toy Photography 101. Again, if you'd like more info on any of these steps, let me know in the comments below. Toy photography is very fun, but it can also be very frustrating and tedious. That said, any hobby that pushes you to learn and improve is really worth the effort. I don't claim to be an incredible toy photographer, but with anything creative, I always try to enjoy the process. I know this week's video was a little bit different, but I hope you enjoyed it. If you're new here and did enjoy, feel free to click that thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. As always, thank you so much for watching and may the force be with you.